Hi, my name is Lisa Lazare, and I am the Managing Director of Outreach at Educators for Excellence Boston. We are a teacher-led organization seeking to ensure that educators are the leading conversations that impact their classroom and careers. Right now, the pressing issue in Boston and around the country is COVID-19 and the challenges it brought to our nation. Today, we're talking about the impact that it's having on educators and students in Boston and discussing solutions for how we can reopen schools in a way that restores our students' sense of safety and recover academic loss, especially for our most vulnerable learners. Today, I'm interviewing Genelle Faulkner, who is a teacher at the Helen Davis School. Thank you, Genelle, for being here today and also for all the different things that you're doing for your students. Can you tell me a little bit about what your journey has been transitioning to distance learning?
It's been interesting, to say the least. I do appreciate that my school was able to roll out some good guidelines. So we were able to kind of set up a schedule and kind of make sure that, we knew what was expected of us going into online learning. They also found a way to hand out the students laptops and make sure that, because we had a one-to-one laptop program, so they handed them out to each individual student, so they were able to kind of collect their laptops to have access. But even with those pluses, it's been really hard. I know the first couple weeks I was like, oh, I'll just do this kind of cafe style Zoom and people can ask questions and it'll be great.
Yes.
And then no one showed up, or one or two kids showed up. And I think it's just kind of going back to understanding that, middle school students don't always know what questions to ask.
Mm-hmm.
So to kind of expect them to, in this remote setting, be able to look at whatever lessons I put up and be like, oh, I know exactly what question to ask, just was not happening. So right now I've tried to transition to actually teaching in Zoom. It's been a learning curve in and of itself. So interesting is what I would call everything.
I mean, I know that you are the science teacher for Helen Davis and that you do a lot of projects-based learning for your students. So how has that transition been, trying to adjust to the distance learning?
I'd say I've taken that project-based learning mindset and tried to be a general theme for my students so far. So I really try to think about, what would they be missing curriculum-wise. So my heart kind of sank when at first they were telling me you can't do anything new, you have to go back to old stuff, because I have certain students who are they're ready for more, and I felt I was holding them back. But I understand where it's coming from.
Yeah.
You don't want to leave students behind and push certain students forward. So I was trying to figure out, okay, what theme can I pull out from what we've already done that I can still apply to certain things and have them, reinforce older ideas that they usually forget. So from that, I came up with a theme of energy.
Ooh, yeah. Say more.
Yeah. We started with kind of talking about, so I know in class, one of the standards that my students really struggled with was understanding thermal energy. And the fact that, thermal energy can move from one system to another. But that is also different from temperature, right? Because if you take the temperature of something, that's the average of all the movement of all the particles. But if you have, if you're trying to assess the thermal energy of something, that's the total amount of particles. So if you have more particles, you actually have more energy, even if those particles are moving really slowly. So I started with that, had them think about kind of, I was also using the PBS online system because that was what was kind of promoted, and they had some resources. So I used a couple lessons on that to kind of guide them through talking about the energy. And then I gave other lessons on kind of kinetic energy. Those concepts are related. And then we built into kind of the more kind of application of that energy. So knowing what we know about energy, how do we apply it? And then of course I had to throw in some Black Panther because
You know how I feel about that. Like, yes.
they talked about kinetic energy, and it just really, I really was trying to like re-engage the students, right? So I know I was, in starting it from kind of a theme setting, I knew that they needed certain concepts kind of reinforced, which is, what I would say the vegetables of the situation. But then of course you need your dessert, you need like that, like you're kind of feeding that interest. So we kind of rounded it off with talking about Black Panther's suit. And so one of the questions I asked them was, in the scene where Shuri is telling him, "Oh, your suits, it's been taken in kinetic energy," and he like jumps on this car and like flips it over because he releases all the energy. I was asking them, okay, now that we've gone through the different forms of energy, what energy was he actually releasing? What did his suit actually have?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them, well, I mean, the 9 kids that did it, everyone was able to say like, oh, his suit took in potential energy.
Yeah.
Energy was the bullets, but his suit had potential energy that he was able to release. So that was just like a great moment. Like, yes, they got it.
Oh, and that sounds wonderful, Genelle. It sounds like not only were you trying to connect to things that your students would be interested in, you were using all the different online resources. You were trying to make the content as relevant and as engaging as possible. And even though you weren't able to do a project based like you would do in your classroom, you made sure to have connecting themes to ensure that there was connections for your students so that they can understand the arc of like what was happening even though they were on an online platform. Can you tell us a little bit about how your students are doing emotionally?
Um, I think, well, the ones I've checked in with, they're generally okay. They seem fine. The What they say the most is that they miss interacting with people, they miss their friends, and they miss connecting with
Mm.
other students. And I had I had one student. She was like, "Is it weird that I miss school?" I was like,
No,
"No,
not at
it's not
all.
weird. Like, you had like a structure, you had
Mm-hmm.
people to talk to, and even though like she prided herself on being kind of ridiculous in class sometimes, but even that was kind of like her engaging, right, and her kind of being in the space. So it's just that sense of like missing out of those connections.
Yeah. And how are your students doing academically? How is this impacting their learning?
um I think it depends, right? So I have kind of the baseline of student who has not engaged, especially because at first, like, it was said, grades aren't really being applied, like you can't grade anything. Now I think they're shifting to kind of trying to get some students back on board with that. So there's like the student that's missing. Then there's like the subset that they're present, but they're not actually working on anything. So they might just be asking a question or
Mm-hmm.
just reaching out, which is fine. Like I'll, obviously be that like human connection for you, but learning isn't necessarily taking place. And then I have like another group who's like, they'll do stuff, but it's not necessarily correct, right? So they're getting it in, and I want to give them credit, but they're not. They're kind of missing some of the information. And then there's a group that I'm just like, oh my gosh, like distance learning is for you. Like I would never get this quality of work in person. Like this is
Oh.
great, Like I have one student, like she's been answering questions, and I can kind of tell the difference between a student who just like, oh, this was the reading, let me take this answer and stick it in the right spot, versus like actually putting in your own words and explaining it. And she's been doing really great. So it's like I've been trying to like celebrate those victories of like this student is like being successful and that student is doing a lot more work than ever, but also keeping in mind that I don't want to leave some of my students behind. I
Of
still
course.
want to make sure that everyone has access.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And when school reopens, we are hearing that student mental health and learning will need to be restored. What do you want decision makers to do in order to first get our students ready to learn psychologically and to ensure that learning loss is recovered?
I think this is a great juncture to reevaluate what we've been doing,
Mm,
because a lot of times we don't get this pause, we don't get this kind of reset button. And so we can look at it as, we need to catch them up as fast as possible. And we need to make sure that they got this and this and this. And we need to build in systems so they can review quickly and like move forward. Um, or we can like really take a look at the standards that we have like been pushing, right? And if they're able to, in this distance learning setting, come up with standards that are the most important, why aren't we developing our curriculum around that, right? Because a lot of the ways that students think is in these kind of small pockets, right? You get the information, you are able to
yes.
process that information, and then you're able to apply it. But a lot of the times for me, science like has its own difficulties because like
Of
everyone
course.
has a different view of what you should be learning. Sometimes in elementary school, like elementary teachers are a little bit scared of teaching it, so they shy away from it, or they might be told, okay, math and English is the testing. Those are the testing subjects. So like, let's just leave science till later. They'll figure it out later. But then if everyone keeps doing that, they get to 8th grade and it's like, oh, we're about to take a test on it. I have to cram all these little bits of information that some of them have never seen before. So I know for me, it might be different for other subjects, but I know for me, what I would want to see is kind of a paring down of like, okay, these are the major themes, these are the major standards, so that I can really dig a little bit deeper with my.
Mm. No, thank you for sharing, honestly, and thank you for sharing all of those reflections on distance learning, your students, the curriculum. We covered a lot of different things in this short amount of time. So before we wrap it up, what is one source of joy or hope that you've experienced recently?
I think one source of joy was this past weekend. I
Yeah.
went hiking. It
Hmm.
was a lot of fun. The weather was beautiful. And then I also did some yoga on my porch,
Ooh.
which was great. It was like the breeze was out. It was fantastic. Which is funny too, because I just moved into this new setting, and I feel like I've lived here for years. Like it hasn't been a year yet, but
Aw.
because I've been just like in here just 24/7 now, it's just like wow. Like I feel like this. Like where did I live before? So it's like, and this is my porch. Like I'm finally doing things on my porch. It's like I'm breaking it in a little bit. So that was really exciting.
Oh no. Well, Genelle, thank you again for just sharing your reflections, your experiences, and your insights with us. And it's just really great to hear from you. And it is important to hear from our teachers and our educators so that we can make the best policy decisions for schools and for our students. So have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thanks, you too.